Hey friends, Kim from Stamping Imperfection. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, I would love to have you click subscribe and click that bell to get notifications every time I upload a new video. I would also love it if you give this video a thumbs up and share with your friends. So today I'm playing with this big bold background stamp from Maker Forte. This is the floral background with sentiments. You can see all the great sentiments included in this set. I love background stamps that have sentiments to go along with them, and this has a nice variety of sentiments, so I can make a variety of different cards. But that background is actually pretty bold, so I have some tricks for toning it down a little bit. Another thing I'm playing with today, these are the birthday medallions. These are foilable, and I'm not going to foil them today, but what I love about Maker Forte foilable sentiments like this is that they come with a second piece with the toner on it that you can use the negative part of your foil on. So after you run a piece of foil over one of the medallions, you can take that same piece of foil and run it over one of the plain ones, and it will put the same design in the negative on that medallion. So you end up with two medallions for the effort of one, and it uses what you would normally just throw out to make you a fabulous sentiment. So I really like the Maker Forte. It's very clever, I think. So I pulled out two of those medallions that I want to use today, and I'm going to make two backgrounds, and with this big bold sentiment. I'm going to start by inking them in clear embossing powder or inking them in clear embossing ink and using white embossing powder to make a very nice white background. And then I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending. But I have a few little tips and tricks that I use to kind of tone down the background, because this can be very bold or you can tone it down. And I've used this background a lot of times. One of my goals for 2022 has been to use things I have in my stash, and that's what I'm doing here today. I only have one thing that I'm using that it's new to me, and that's my glue. Everything else has been in my stash for months, so I'm using my stash. So I'm just getting my Misty all ready to go here. I'm putting my cardstock down in the middle, and I'm going to use some temporary adhesive on the back of that to hold that in place. I'll put some paper down, add some temporary adhesive, and that will hold that in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my Color Hive ink from Maker Forte. This is the clear embossing ink. And I'm just giving this a good inking. Now, I've used this before, so I didn't need to condition it. It's already conditioned. If you need to condition your stamp because it's new, definitely do that, however you like to condition your stamps. And it inks beautifully and stamps perfectly the first time. So once I have that clear embossing ink on there with my background stamp, I'm going to go ahead and add some white embossing powder. For years, I've been keeping my white embossing powder in this big tub, and I emboss so much more now because I do this. It's usually neater, although I did make a little bit of a mess there. And I'm going to then go ahead and heat set this with my heat tool. And I also created a second one. So I have two of these, and I'm going to go ahead and do some ink blending now. So for the first one, I decided that I wanted to use this Color Hive color called Icy Mist. It is a very soft, light blue color. It's one of my favorite colors to use for blue skies on my scene cards. And I like to use it when I want some subtle color on a background. I don't want in-your-face color. So this is I feel like it's one of my secret weapons for pretty cards, is having this really pretty light color that I pull out and use all the time. I'm using a big blender brush here because I'm doing this whole surface, and you can see that's a busy background. So because it's so busy, I don't have to worry about blending this perfectly, especially since I'm just using one color. So I'm just covering the whole thing, and I just keep working on it till I have the shade or the brightness of that color that I want. And isn't that pretty? It's a subtle color, but it's enough to make the pattern pop, and it's going to look really pretty with that medallion in the center. So I'm going to trim this down a little bit because the background stamp did not cover the whole background. I'm going to cut 1/4 of an inch off the bottom and 1/4 of an inch off the side. So when I put this down on my card base, I'll have a little bit of a white border around. And I like that because it always gives your eye a little bit of relief. So here's the new glue I'm using. This is from Maker Forte. It's called Maker's Magic No-Show Glue. It's a nice multi-purpose glue. I like the tip of this glue because it's got a finer tip than a lot of my other glue bottles. And I'm just gluing the background down, centering it on my card base. And I've stopped using so much foam. It's kind of expensive, and I think the cards are just as pretty without the foam and easier to mail, certainly. So I'm trying to use less resources in that way and, reduce my stash a little by not having so much of that kind of stuff around. So I'm working on reducing my stash in 2022 here. So I pulled out some black twine that I've had in my stash for a while, and I'm just tying a bow on the side there, fussing with it a little bit. I put some foam squares on the back of my medallion. That I will pop up on some foam, and the foam will go above and below that twine, so I can still slide that twine if I need to. And again, fussing with the bow more. I used to put twine and ribbon on almost every card I made, and I kind of got out of the habit of that, but I'm trying to use up some of my stash, and I've got a lot of ribbon and twine. So I just put down 5 dots of glue to add some crown jewel gems. I pulled out some blue crown jewel gems here. This is my magic wand jewel picker. It's got a jewel picker on one end and a craft pick on the other end, like a paper piercer, and it's fabulous for picking up your gems. You can see how easily I pick them up and deposit them on the glue. So that's going to complete that card. Now I'm going to go to the second background that I made and change it up just a little bit. For this one, I'm going to use 3 different colors of ink and do a little bit more blending between. And I'm pulling out colors I feel like are really good for fall. Since I'm making some birthday cards for my stash, I'll have this birthday card for a fall birthday. I'm noticing that there's more of the front panel that did not get covered by that background stamp, so I'm going to make this a little bit smaller when I trim it down. So that's another trick that I use. I will cut the big backgrounds down so that they don't take up the entire front of my card, and that will allow me to actually use some of my scrap cardstock for a layer behind this front panel, and that'll actually again give your eye a place to rest, which is what the twine does also. It kind of breaks up that background and gives your eye a place to rest, and I always like that. So I used this English mustard yellow on the bottom, and then I pulled out the red Leicester orange and blended that a little bit. Now I'm taking the yellow brush back and I'm blending right between the two and just giving myself a nice blend between those two. And I'm not too worried about any of the edges there, just because I'm going to trim this down. So now I'm using that Grand Canyon brown, and it's kind of a reddish brown, so it blends really nicely with that red Leicester orange. And again, I have a darker blob there in the corner. I'll cut that off and it won't even show. I pulled out my orange brush again and blended the line between the two. So I've got a nice blend going from the yellow, the orange, and the brown. Now I pull out my microfiber cloth and I just wipe the ink off that embossing because the embossing does not absorb the ink sits on top of it. You want to wipe it off before you handle that card a lot. You notice I'm also cleaning up my desktop, and now I'm going to trim it down, and I'm trimming about 1/2 inch off each side. So it will be, instead of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, it will be 3 1/4 by 4 1/2 when I'm done. And this will give me the opportunity to use a piece of scrap cardstock in a color that coordinates with the colors that I used here to put a mat behind this. So I like the way that medallion looks. I think that's really fun. I pulled out some of that scrap cardstock. I'm still using that same Maker's Magic no-show glue and just centering it in that piece of cardstock that I found in my stash, and I'll trim it down so that'll still give me a nice piece for another project. And then I will add that again with the glue. Now, if you love adding foam to your cards, definitely when you layer them, put foam on at least one of those layers. And I decided I wanted to add, instead of the black twine, I have some all natural twine, which I will add here. Again, this is just another way to break up that background and give your eye some relief as you're looking at that background. You can see the white embossing powder definitely helps take it down. The soft colors that I've used to ink blend help take it down. The fact that I cut the pieces down so I have a border around, or in this case, couple of borders, helps actually like take that bold background down a couple notches. And then I'm using a large sentiment medallion that also helps. And on this one, I want to add some more crown jewel gems. This time I'm going to add clear, and I'm going to put a dot of glue in the center of each one of those stars. And I'll use my magic wand jewel picker here to add one of those clear jewels in the center of each of the stars. And they sort of look like star flowers, which I like. I think that's actually really fun. And that is going to complete this card. So I have 2 cards that I think work for either gender, and one will be great for fall birthdays, and the other one for birthday any time of the year. So I'll have those in my stash all ready to go for when I need them. And I'm excited to be using things from my stash. I'll put links to all the products that I used here below. I would love it if you give this video a thumbs up, and check out that glue. Actually, it dries clear and matte, so it works pretty well here. So I actually really like it. So thank you so much for watching, friends. Make sure you subscribe if you're not subscribed, and click that bell to get notifications every time I upload a new video. Have a creative day.